Hey, it's Mike from Guitar World. We are here in the thick of it at NAMM 2022, and I'm here with Justin over on the two-note stand. He's the most attractive guy on the stand. That's why he's doing the demo. That's what I've been told. But he's going to tell us all about the ReVolt guitar, which is a pretty exciting new development for two notes.
Yeah, thanks, Michael. We're very excited. The last product we released was a little over 2.5 years ago, which was the Captor X, and it's been a monumental success. So that's been great, but we're not ones to rest on our laurels or so. The copy says for this. So we came out for 2022 with two new preamp pedals, and they're a little different than people might expect that we would do. So we have the ReVolt guitar, or the ReVolt G, and then we also made a bass version, which is the ReVolt B. They do a lot of things, but they're very easy to use, and we wanted them to make sure that they fit different audiences, but at the same time, simplicity. So we'll go through it and it'll make more sense, but if it doesn't sound good, then it doesn't matter. So that's what we wanted to make sure we did correctly. So the first thing about the new preamp pedals is they actually are high voltage. So that tube in there is not just a light bulb, that it's actually running at 200 volts. What does that mean? Well, we have a 12 volt, 500 milliamp jack in there, so it'll work with our adapter, or any modern power supply has a 12 volt tap. But what we're doing is using a DC to DC converter, which will step that voltage up to right at about 200 volts, which you need about 180 volts plus to really make a preamp tube work correctly. So it's not just a light bulb, and we're not bypassing the circuitry. So in layman's terms, what does that really mean? That means that you're opening the dynamic range of the circuit, but more importantly, it opens the feel and response like a true tube amp would respond, which is paramount. There's a lot of yin and yang about digital modeling, which that's more what we're known for, especially on the cabinet side, versus analog, and which one's better and which one's more real. There's a certain thing that analog does if the circuits are designed well, that it has a responsiveness and a feel to it. So again, we're not known necessarily for being this, but we wanted to do something that had a lot of thought, a lot of output in a simple package, and it's all analog.
So, let's hear it.
So starting out, we did model these after physical amps that we had in our lab in France, and I was very fortunate to get to work on these and see them in action, so I can attest that they were very close, if not almost identical to what was there. So the first amp that we used was a Fender Basement 100, an early 70s model, and that's what this was designed after. It's got very simple controls, just like any of the Fender amps, like the Basement or the Deluxe. So you've got a treble and bass control. We added a gain knob to kind of control how tight or how warm that signal can be. But then you'll notice something that all three channels do that's pretty different. We actually added a boost control that's assignable to all three of the channels if you wish. So you have a 3-channel preamp now, but you have a boost that you can assign. So if I go back here and we just play a few chords, that's very, very Fendery. Very much that Fender sound that you're familiar with, right? That everybody's familiar with. But then we kind of engage the boost, and it starts adding a little grit and grind, but the whole idea was to be smooth yet have punch to it. So I'll just add that in there, and now you kind of have a crunched up Basement. And you can get quite a bit of gain just out of that.
Yeah, that kind of sag in there, definitely.
Yeah, you absolutely can, and that's the thing about going back to the tube voltage. To get that push and that pull and that sag, you've got to do it like that. And that's the thing that it seems trivial, and almost seems like just a marketing thing. It's not. It actually has a purpose.
It's the feel, man. It's the feel.
If it doesn't feel good, then does anybody care?
Don't play
right?
good.
So right after that, the British Crunch is voiced after a plexi that we had also in the lab. Now what we did slightly different was, anywhere up to about 10 o'clock, you're going to get regular plexi gain. So just go and start at the beginning. Right about there, kind of that AC/DC kind of crunch. And then, if you want to go way beyond, and now it becomes this super hot-rodded plexi. And I'm just using a little bit of that. And something you'll notice too, it's very quiet. It didn't add a ton of high-end noise. That's also something that's very hard to do with any tube circuit is noise. So there's a lot of clever engineering by our smart engineering team to get that in there. But you can see that, you know, it's bypassable, but when it's added, it just adds a little extra. But the feel still, it's still, I mean, you could just live off and just roll. Yeah, and then for the third channel, we did a model of an SLO 100 amp in there. So it just has even more gain, more compression, more squish. So the nice thing is we also voice the EQs to kind of summon difference, all the great qualities of the Plexi and the SLO, but make them work together. So it's truly like, you know, two channels working in conjunction with a lot of the characteristics that you know and like from those. So it wasn't what one channel's this planet and this channel's that planet. They just sit really well together. So anyway, and then just to add this in there, these EQ controls are very active. So there's a lot of range, a lot of range in tone shaping. And we put, you know, you can feel the saturation in there. And there's no boost in there yet either. So. And then back to clean.
Sounds massive, man.
So a couple other things I'll show you that this is kind of designed as an all-in-one type solution. There's also an effects loop in the back. So the effects loop runs pre-output section. So if you're running the XLR out or going to any kind of IR box like our CAB-M or any of the other various ones on the market, it keeps it very much inside the amp circuit. There's something very clever that we added inside of that as well. You'll see on this front panel we have an auxiliary input, and then we have a headphone out, which everybody asks for. But you can not only turn the cab sim off and on so you can get a DI signal that you could reamp later, but we have a 4-cable method switch, and this works a little differently than when people think of 4-cable method. So the easiest way I'd explain that is, say you have an amp with an effects loop like a Marshall 800, which is one channel. If you put this into 4-cable method and put this into the effects loop of the amp, you can now add 3 channels, but wait, 3 channels with boost, so you have like 6 quasi-channels. So, and then when you hit the two buttons together, it will go back to the amp's preamp section. So if you have a 2-channel amp, now you've added 5 channels. And as soon as you hit one of these buttons, you're switching the channels. It's like any preamp type pedal, you can run in the effects return, but this is unique to this of really being an amp extender. So going back to kind of the original stuff is, we try to fit as many different audiences as we could without compromising anything. Yeah. But again, if it doesn't sound good and doesn't feel good, you know, did you get it right? Yeah. So that's kind of it.
That's amazing. Thanks so much for your time, Justin. Sounds awesome.
Well, thank you, Michael. Thanks, guys.